I'm so happy to have Hadhee join us again for the summit. I always so much enjoy chatting with Hadhee. And for those of you who don't know her, she is originally from the Maldives and has done a lot of work around Indigenous midwifery, um, from her cultural background and really preserving Indigenous midwifery, which is in great danger of being eradicated in that part of the world. I do definitely want us to talk about postnatal today, and I definitely want to talk about your new book. But before we dive into that, Hadhee, do you want to just share a little bit about the work that you've done with Mothers of the Maldives? Because I think for those that don't know it, it's so beautiful to know about.
Yeah, I started studying to be a doula after my first baby, and then I began to realize that I was literally the only doula from my country. So in the Maldives, birth was medicalized about 25, 30 years ago. It was completely medicalized. And now there are no home births left, whereas in the past we had a very robust traditional system of midwifery with home births. And there was this beautiful relationship between the island's herbalist and the midwives, and all the aunties would come and the grandmas, when a woman went into labor. So it was very much like a part of the culture. However, since it's been completely medicalized, there are no traditional midwives in practice anymore. So I'm literally one of the only people that I know of who's trying to keep those traditions alive today, because if they get lost, then we won't have access to them anymore. So my great aunt was one of the last traditional midwives in my lineage, and she just passed away 3 months ago before I had a chance to even speak to her. So this is this is the reality for our country at the moment.
Yeah, and as you say, the clock is ticking because these elders are getting older, and so this wisdom, it needs to be preserved and recorded, otherwise it will be lost. And you've been doing so much work around that. I know that you've been, collating information and interviewing and really making a big effort to create archive of this work and to speak to the women that have, delivered hundreds, if not thousands, of babies over decades. I mean, we were just talking about this on the previous call. There's no there's no replacement for that level of experience, like all the medical intervention in the world, which sometimes, is needed. I'm not speaking completely against medical institutions, but when they arise to the cost of traditional midwifery, like when traditional midwifery gets eradicated because of modern medicine, that's heartbreaking because we lose so much wisdom and so much knowledge that cannot be replaced. I was talking to an obstetrician the other day, and she was telling me that she had attended a birth not so long ago where the baby had turned out to be breech and it was unexpected. And while she was delivering this baby, they realized that the baby was breech. And the woman who was birthing her baby, this kind of made me laugh, because the obstetrician obviously was very shocked that it wasn't a head presenting, right? And she said to the obstetrician, "Oh, you're not worried because you've lost your skills, are you? Because you don't know how to deliver a breech baby." I don't know how she managed to kind of be a little bit sarcastic and tongue in cheek in labor, but it's true, right? So many medical professionals these days just literally do not have the skills. And we hear again and again that midwives are not used to physiological birth. They're just not used to delivering babies without interventions. It's just kind of becoming almost unheard of, almost obsolete. So here we have this incredible, rich indigenous culture that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And we have living women who have delivered hundreds, if not thousands of babies without intervention, without medicalization. We have to realize that we've got something to learn from them. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
absolutely.
yeah.
And it's not even just birth, because when birth gets medicalized, we actually just lose all the postpartum care. And that was even bigger than the actual birth itself, because that went on for, at least 6 weeks. So all the different modalities that were used in that time to just basically concentrate all the efforts on the mother's recovery, they are just so endangered. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you've done in order to preserve this work and also an element of memoir, tell your own story of postnatal recovery, is you've written an absolutely beautiful, beautiful book, which I had the pleasure of receiving a advanced copy of. So I've actually read it and it really is a delight. Um, Tell us a little bit about what drew you to writing the book, Hadhee. Oh, I think we've got a little bit of a freeze on the internet connection. Let's just see if we can get Hadhee back in. I'm not sure if you can hear me, Hadhee, but you might want to leave and come back in again because we've got you frozen at the moment. So the book that Hadhee has written is about postnatal care, and it specifically comes from that Ayurvedic indigenous perspective. And what I love about it is it really includes, well, it's partly memoir. So Hadhee talks about her own experience of birthing her babies and what caring for them looked like and how her own mother helped her, for example, with practices like belly binding. But she also gives recipes in the book for Ayurvedic nourishment after birth. And she gives some beautiful herbal remedies and ideas for ways in which herbs can be used medicinally and as allies in our postnatal recovery. And I love in the book the way that she has combined her own personal story with the tips and the ideas and the actual teachings that we can utilize in our own lives. You're back, Hadhee. We lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm just talking about the book. And one of the things I really love about the book is that it tells your stories, as well as giving the teachings from your ancestors and, the food teachings and the herb teachings. And I realize more and more with birth work, the more I do this work, the more I realize the importance of storytelling. Like it's in hearing other women's stories and seeing ourselves in other women's experiences, for better and for worse, for the challenges and the joys, that we really heal. And that we learn that we can grow together collectively. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of deciding to write the book and then starting to write it? From my side, it feels like you wrote it very quickly, but I don't know if that is how it felt for you.
Oh no, I had already been writing my birth story, yeah, going back over a year. And I had little bits and pieces. And what I was finding in my work, as because I'm an Ayurvedic postpartum doula, so I work with women after they have babies. And often I would have a meeting with the client and I would tell her all this information, and it would just be like, over the head, because when you're pregnant or when you've just had a baby, it's not the easiest time to be taking in all that information. So I just had this thought that maybe because what happened for me was that I had to live those teachings because of what happened with me. I was learning to be an Ayurvedic doula when I became pregnant. Oh, that's my baby. Let me just go and grab him. Sorry. Just give him a little feed and hope he settles. um, yeah, so this is the baby, by the way, in the book. This is the baby that was
Real life
born.
example. I love it.
Yes. And yeah, where was I? So I had to actually live those teachings. I had to become my own doula. And what I found was that when I told my story to people, and because you have to tell those elements of why you do things in a certain way within Ayurveda after birth. It seemed to stick more with people. It seemed to move people a lot more. So that's what gave me the idea. Maybe I need to write a book and put all of the things that I knew about Ayurvedic postpartum care. And from working with herbs, I've been working with herbs and food for over 10 years. So it just all kind of came together. It did come together quite quickly when I decided to turn it into a book, but because it's all my story, it's like not like I'm creating characters and any of that. It was just simply telling my story and
It's
weaving
your
those
story, but it's also
aspects.
actually full of information. Like it's a really great resource for new mothers. And I was just saying when the Zoom cut out, for me, because of course there are recipe books that exist and there are books about herbs and protocols for postnatal, but and some of them are really great, but they can often feel quite kind of dry because it's not necessarily in the context of a lived experience. Whereas you're weaving your own story and your own experience with the recipes and the ideas and the teachings. And then the other thing that I love about it is I feel like you really have a foot in your ancestry and a foot in the ancient ways. Like I really feel that come through in the way that you write and teach. But also you're a woman of the modern world. Like you're, like many of us, you're living, doing the juggle and all the kind of things that we're up against in modern life. So it really feels like the overall feeling I had in reading the book was one of great comfort. It felt very comforting. And I feel that for any woman postnatally that wants to really experience that kind of feeling of nourishment and comfort, that's what the book offers.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. Thank you so much.
Can you tell us a little bit about the food protocols? So, for those who don't know anything about Ayurveda and for whom it's really quite new, you know, if we think about the kind of food that we're fed in hospital, I remember the only time I had a baby it was a birthing center actually, and stayed for any length of time. I was very fortunate. I was able to go home very quickly after all my babies. But in the birth center, I hadn't eaten for a long time. And the first thing they gave me was a cold yogurt from the fridge, which I didn't eat. But maybe you can tell us why eating a cold yogurt from the fridge isn't the best after just having literally just having given birth, and then what kind of foods from an Ayurvedic perspective, foods and liquids would be like really optimum.
Yeah, so in the Ayurvedic perspective, what happens when the baby is born in the moment of birth, the digestive fire or Agni is pretty much almost extinguished. And that's a huge state of emergency within the body because without Agni, we can't digest our food. There's so many things that Agni forms the foundation for. And because this happens after birth, the traditional protocols are to restart that fire. So everything that is done in terms of herbal ghee and spices and foods that are really warm, moist, oily, grains that are cooked with extra water. Meat is not, if you're eating meat, it's not recommended for at least the first 3 weeks because it's very heavy for the body to digest. Because you can imagine it like the fire in a house going out. And what comes in is the cold and the drafts and the moisture. And then that starts to manifest later down the track in the body as chronic health conditions and digestive problems. So I asked my audience a while back about how many women lost their appetite after birth, and 50% of the women said that yes, they lost their appetite. And that's exactly why that happens. So eating things like often they will offer toast or cold, yogurts or smoothies. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to put the nutrients back in, I'm going to have a green smoothie. The body literally cannot digest those foods. So
So
that's
we,
why we
yeah,
have those specific protocols in Ayurveda.
we need warm and moist and very, very easy to digest. In fact, there was one recipe in your book which made me quite emotional. It kind of brought a tear to my eye because I was so so incredibly fortunate with my first child. We were living with my parents-in-law, and my mother-in-law um, is Greek. She's from a small village in Greece. And in the Greek Orthodox Church, she was quite religious. She's passed away now. They also do 40 days of staying home after you've had your baby, which is part of Ayurveda and, the Indian and Maldivian protocol. And so I was really, really lucky that I got to stay home for 40 days after I had my first child and be basically just completely nurtured and looked after in the most beautiful way. And she knew that I was vegetarian, so she made me all this beautiful vegetarian Mediterranean style. But funnily enough, the postpartum food that they feed traditionally in Greece and the Mediterranean countries is very similar to the Ayurvedic food, different spices, but lots of oil, always warm, a little bit soupy. So she used to make me a dish that was zucchini with a lot of olive oil and a lot of lemon. And it was one of my favorite things. And she would
Oh,
also add chickpeas for a little bit of protein because the Greeks do eat a lot of meat. So she was always very worried about me not having enough protein. Um, and this dish was so delicious, so oily and unctuous and warm, and just the perfect postnatal food, easy to digest. And then when I read your book, I saw that you also have a zucchini dish with a lot of olive oil that it just really reminded me of my own postnatal time. It was such a lovely thing to read about. Um, the other recipe you have in there that I just love is the golden rice. Can you tell us a little bit about that recipe? Maybe share with us how to make it for those who don't know.
it's the best and it's so simple. It's basically cooking. I use basmati rice because it's very nutritious. So but you can use any, long grain rice that you have. Just cook it as you would normally, maybe add in a little bit extra liquid if you're postpartum. Um, in my training, they recommend when you first start out eating grains as a postpartum mother to cook the proportion of water to grains is like 16 parts of water to 1 part grain. So it's very, very soupy, but you don't have to do it that way. I actually don't like it that soupy. But I just cook rice the way you would normally, maybe a little bit more moist than normal. And then with turmeric, and you can add in if you've got like, or you can cook it in like a stock or vegetable broth or something for added nutrients, and lots and lots of black pepper, and yeah, salt and lemon and ghee, and it is the most grounding, delicious, just I could eat it all day. It's so good. And it's so
Yeah.
comforting. It goes in and it warms you up. And yeah, I love that recipe so much.
It also has such a beautiful fragrance. I find whenever I make it, it kind of fills the house with this beautiful kind of like golden rice and golden fragrance. It's so warming and comforting, really
Mm.
lovely. So we use a lot of oil postnatally in Ayurveda in the body, like we are not afraid to consume some good fat, but we also use oil on the body. Can you tell us a little bit about Vata? And some people might not know what Vata is, and then some of the protocols that we can do to reduce Vata after having given birth.
Yeah, so Vata is basically one of so in Ayurveda, we have different constitutions. So one of those constitutions is Vata. It's basically the energy that um, influences the body the most. So there's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is the energy of air and space and wind. So, I mean, this makes sense postpartum because when the baby leaves the body, there's this great big empty space in the body. And so postpartum is considered to be a time of extreme Vata derangement, like extreme. So the diet that's recommended, all the protocols, all of them are designed to reduce Vata derangement in the body. And one of those things that does reduce Vata is called Abhyanga, which is applying warm sesame oil to the whole body, like head to toe. And this is recommended to be done every single day. Like traditionally in India, if a mother is receiving traditional care, usually the mother-in-law or someone who's related to the mother will come and massage her every single day. And when I heard this from my teacher, I cried because I just thought, how beautiful is that, And what it does is it basically coats the body in oil, which is countering those qualities of dryness and harshness that if you imagine you're out in the wind and it's really windy, that's basically what vata derangement feels like. And all the things that arise from that are things like the extreme levels of anxiety that a lot of people go through after postpartum. I know I went through that. It's really like nothing else, anxiety, and yeah, just feeling unsettled, racing thoughts, inability to sleep. A lot of those things are related to the state of vata in the body. And when we apply warm oil to the body, it just soothes that. It counters the dryness and the harshness, and the warmth counters the cold of the wind as well. And it's just a really beautiful protective shield around the body. And what I found the most helpful about this practice was it actually, in my opinion, is the best thing for birth trauma. So my experience was quite traumatic, and just that act of putting oil on the skin, the word for oil in Sanskrit translates to love. So it's like the ultimate act of self-love, Even Dr. Vasant Lad, who is one of the most eminent figures in Ayurveda in the world, says that this is the one practice for extending life that everyone should be doing on a daily basis. So it's that powerful.
Mm.
Mm.
And the picture that you're painting of postpartum care and what that could look like, from the Abhyanga, the self-massage, through to the foods and the rest and the bringing down the vata, it it feels so nourishing, and it feels so obviously right. As I was reading your book, it's like all the different things that you're describing, they intuitively feel like the right thing to do. And yet in our culture, it's such a different narrative. We're kind of praised for getting back out there, or being able to take our babies to the supermarket and kind of just continue on doing all the things as if nothing had happened. Um, so I think so much of the protocols in Ayurveda postnatally that we're talking about here are really about slowing down and taking the time that we need to integrate. And one of the things that you shared is that 40 days invested postnatally could last us for 40 years after that postnatal period. Can you talk a little bit about that teaching?
Yeah, so that's the biggest message. Like I feel like that needs to be shouted from the rooftops, because in the Ayurvedic perspective, that's what they say. What happens to the mother in those first 40 days is going to influence the next 4 decades of her life. So whether we, agree with it or not, that's basically what happens. And that relates to that state of vata derangement, and how vata is often seen as the seat of chronic illness and depletion as well. And also, just like what happens when we open in birth, the portal opens with proper postpartum care. And this is found in like pretty much most human cultures, indigenous cultures around the world. There has to be a closing of that process. And without that, we are spiritually, energetically leaking energy. And a lot of the, I would put money on this, like a lot of the postpartum depletion is coming from that energetic drainage that continues from that point where modern medicine says you are healed now, you are done, you are finished, you should be back to normal, but there is no more normal from that point. And these rites of passage, this way of holding and nurturing the mother, that is what's going to help her transform from that maiden crossing over into the mother. And we have these beautiful rites like the closing of the bones, where, and even just simple belly binding, all of those things are designed to seal and close the energy of the mother so she doesn't continue to leak, because that's what enhances the depletion after. Mm.
If anyone has any questions for Hadhee, please pop them in the chat now. We'll open up to questions. We would love to receive your questions. So please go ahead and write them in the chat. It's really interesting because we were just talking before about that sort of postnatal completion from a physical point of view, but you're also talking about it from an energetic point of view as well, that it's like a rite of passage that, like you said, the portal opens and then needs to close again. And I feel that sometimes we think about the babies as being very vulnerable and very open. You know, the crown chakra is still open because the fontanelle is still soft. But it's the same for us as mothers. It's like we give birth and then there we are walking around the world and everything feels open and exposed and very raw. And we're expected to just sort of carry on. And it's very confronting. It's really challenging. So I really appreciate this. And I think it's so important, this narrative of um, take the time, take all the time in the world. You know, it's such a cliche to say it, but the truth is we will not get these times back. They're so, so precious. And as I had more babies, that window postpartum got harder and harder. You know, by the time I had my fifth baby, I had four other humans to look after. And one of my, I don't want to say regrets, but one of the things I would really prioritize doing differently would be giving myself that time, even when it was a little bit hard to organize. You know, for example, when I had baby number five, I still had two young children that I had to pick up from school every day. And I felt that whole thing of like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience my friends and have them have to pick up my kids. I'm fine. I can hop in the car and go and get them. I can take the baby. Actually, no, it would have been so much better if I'd asked for the help and taken the time and really, you know, just slowed right down. So we spoke a little bit before about asking for help, and I think it's such a valuable skill to learn, the skill of asking for help. We have a few questions. Chaska would love to hear your perspective on bathing the baby and baby Abhyanga, when to begin both.
With baby Abhyanga, I started with this baby. I've got around 6 days. So usually after the cords, once it's safe for the cord area to be wet. So, I mean, obviously, always check in with the midwife or doctor, whoever's there to make sure that it's all okay to go ahead with it. But I started with 6 days and I continued for the first year, not every single day, but every other day or so. And the sequence is to do baby abhyanga and then you wash the baby with this beautiful traditional recipe. It's called a pudding soap, but it's made from like a chickpea, I think it's chickpea. Some kind of yeah, it turns into this beautiful sort of jelly like substance that you just smear the baby with and then you put the baby in the bath and they come
It's
out
yeah, it's
so
bee
soft.
sunflower, which is ground
Decent,
up
yes.
chickpeas. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's just
Beautiful. One
beautiful.
of the things I did with my boys is that their dad did the massage for them when they were babies, which was such a nice thing because, you know, when you're mum, sometimes it's nice to have a moment to yourself. And it can
Absolutely.
be really hard for partners to connect with really little babies, especially if you're breastfeeding and they're kind of skin to skin a lot and perhaps co-sleeping as well. So I found that having their father do the massage on the babies, it was a really lovely bonding for them and also a little window of time for me to have to myself. It was a really nice
Yeah,
practice.
absolutely.
Claire is saying, what do you think your next steps are for your work with reinvigorating Indigenous birthing wisdom in the Maldives?
Well, my focus is on being able to go back to the Maldives so that I can um, actually speak with the midwives that are left. Yeah, I'm really hoping we can go at the end of the year. But I really would like to make a documentary because I feel like it needs to be there. They need to speak from their voices. We need to hear their experiences and their stories because for so many years they have been demonized in our culture as being uneducated and illiterate and the reason why babies were dying. But I would actually like to go and ask them how they did things. And yeah, so that's my focus at the moment.
Beautiful. And then last question, Jessica would like to know for belly binding, do you recommend a type of fabric and duration of time each day and length of weeks after birth?
Yeah, so usually it's muslin, just a simple muslin. You can get it from made like shops like Lincraft and Spotlight. Um, yeah, really simple. You don't have to sew the edges or anything. I just rip the fabric because it's something that you can use over and over again, but it tends to get oily and it'll get pooped on and weed on by the baby and stuff like that. So yeah, just some simple muslin is the best one, something soft for the skin. And I started belly binding, I think it was day 3, but that was only because my doula didn't arrive when she said she would. But in the traditional setting, belly binding is done as soon as possible after birth. And you can wear it for anywhere between 20 minutes to a few hours, but it's not recommended to sleep with the belly bind on because that's when you need to just be able to relax. But I would get up in the morning and I would bind my belly basically first chance I got. And then I wouldn't take it off until I was going to bed in the evening sometimes, or until it was time to have a shower or something. So I was wearing it for several hours a day, and it really, really helped with my core stability. And just like it gives you this sense of being supported that is like nothing else. It's so good.
It's really good for reducing the vata. It makes you feel contained rather than just kind of like overexposed.
Yes.
Um, we had a tutorial. You did a tutorial for the belly binding. Is it available? Is it on your Instagram or anywhere like that?
Yeah, if you go on my website, there's a tab Work with Me. I've actually got an Ayurvedic belly binding tutorial. You can just watch on the page there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hadhee. Thank you for your time and for doing the juggle for us. Beautiful breastfeeding mama, still managing to share your wisdom. I'm so grateful to you. And please do go and follow Hadhee on Instagram and support her work because what she is doing is really, really important and it's pioneering and no one else is doing it. So I feel very strongly that we should all be supporting her as much as we possibly can. And I strongly believe in the work that you're doing. Thank you, Hadhee.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you.